Please put your hands together as I invite Jonas Gyllenhammer, CTO of Avanti. Hello, Jonas. Very good. Elbow bump. Excellent. Shaq Ahmed from Pentera. Here's Shaq. Do you want an elbow or a fist? Elbow. Good. Excellent. Dean Armstrong QC. Hi, Dean. Go on. Let's all do this. It's working, I think. Joe Hardstaff, who is an independent CISO. Thank you, Joe. There we are.
Thank you.
You're going to wear out my elbow in a minute. Keep on doing this. Dennis Onua, who is a CISO at Arkiva. Here's Dennis. Take a seat.
Well.
Oh, fist bump as well. There you go. There we are. And joining us virtually via the power of Teams or Zoom or one of those. I don't understand the technology. It could be a couple of yogurt pots and a taut piece of string as far as I know. We've got Ingo Schubert from RSA. Give us a wave, Ingo. There you are. Thank you for joining us. And we have Kieran Shepherd from F5 Networks. Hi, Kieran. We have to say a special thanks to Kieran because he's not purely in that box for technical reasons. He's in that box for social distancing reasons. You're feeling all right, aren't you, Kieran? But you've had a positive result. Is that right? Oh, he's all quiet. He's lost his... Oh, no, he's there. He is. Anyway, we hope that things sort out well for you there. Anyway, our next section is all about cybersecurity, obviously, but the front line of cybersecurity and how to defend in the global attack on data. And why don't we, while we've got him here, why don't we start off with Kieran as actually from F5. Kieran, just how bad are things out there?
Well, obviously, if you read the industry press, you'd see it was pretty bad. And, looking at some of the statistics mentioned there around, I think it was 3/4 of CISOs experiencing a data breach in the last 12 months and feeling less prepared. Let's just think about this logically. Every business that we deal with in our day-to-day fabric of our lives, retail, utilities, finance, transport, they all rely on the transport and transmission of data. Deal with that, what's happened in the last 24 months, people working from disparate locations. Add on top of that the different technologies that have arrived in the past maybe half a decade, SaaS, cloud technologies, microservices. It's a real kind of rat's nest of technologies. Cybersecurity is incredibly difficult. So it's kind of no wonder, really, that we're seeing these in the news stories on a daily, weekly basis. And we're not just talking about industry press here. We're talking about on the 10 o'clock news, primetime TV. So, yes, in answer to your question, it is pretty bad out there.
Ingo, what's your feeling about it? How bad are things? Are things going to get worse or are things going to get better?
Yeah, I'm the optimist. I think they're going to get better. I have to think that because otherwise, what else are you going to think of? It's pretty depressing otherwise. But I think currently we're going through a lot of change. The pandemic, of course, accelerated a lot of that change. But even before that, we saw adoption of cloud services, people basically working remote, even if they're in the office, because they're accessing cloud services, which makes them a remote worker, towards that cloud service. And all the challenges that come with that. Remote working is here to stay. We see that now that offices get downsized because people actually stay at home, do the work there, and then the businesses have to adjust to that new reality, where they have to onboard people completely remote. Before they actually can go to the office, pick up the laptop and all that, it doesn't work anymore. They have to do everything remotely. And from a security perspective, of course, there's a whole other bunch of challenges around that. How do you securely enroll a user when you never really see them in person? So all those things are especially in this pandemic, but are here to stay as well in many cases.
But most organizations have had remote workers or mobile workers for some time. Should we have been caught on the hop by this, or do you feel that we've done a good job generally? Is it a case that CISOs weren't prepared?
They had remote workers, but there were a selected few in many cases. Yeah, and they usually had them under control. But suddenly, like 100% sometimes of users, of workers were remote. Yeah? And that was just like too much. Yeah? And they basically had to make a decision. Do I just keep the business running, or do I actually make some compromises on the security side to actually keep that running? Yeah. So, for example, they then just use passwords to authenticate to services, to the VPN or to our cloud services, and don't use strong authentication. Yeah. Why? Because the alternative was don't do it. Yeah. And that was not an option for many of them. Yeah. Of course, you can say from a security perspective, like, no, don't do that. Yeah. Do it the correct way. Enroll users in some MFA, do strong authentication. But reality was that not everybody was able to do that. Yeah? Many did, and over the last couple of months, of course, many caught up on this technical debt. But it's especially in the beginning, that wasn't the case, and that of course opened them up to attacks. Okay,
well, I want to open this up to the whole group now because I've got some questions. I want to know what we think are the biggest issues. What are the things that companies aren't properly addressing now but should be? Anyone want to take that easy ball?
Yeah, I'll add to that. I think in terms of just being able to measure the security as well, and we're talking about this exponential growth of people working at home and taking shortcuts. And I think now we need to sort of go back and sort of, shore up those things that we weren't able to measure and test. So I think an important part of that is just understanding what does that landscape look like now? Where are those gaps? And there's various things that you can do around that. And I think, we were talking about this off air as well. It's sort of combining that capability of being the defender and the attacker as well. And having that sort of intimate knowledge of what the estate looks like, what the organization looks like. But then if I was the attacker, how would I approach it? How would I look at it?
Graham, I think one of the biggest challenges is education. And I think that's much more difficult in a pandemic or particularly in a remote working situation. Because I think most things in terms of unwelcome visitors, if you like, are through people quite innocently opening things they shouldn't be opening, not having the education to check. And I think that's a problem. And I think it's much more difficult to marshal your troops, as it were, if you have a remote group. And as I say, almost always it's completely innocent, but the education of the workforce not to, or to think twice, not to open things that look a bit suspicious, I think is the key. Having said that, I think the sophistication of the hackers gains ground all the time. One of the scenarios I had to advise upon was a CEO had builders doing an extension, and what had happened was that the builders had been hacked, obviously unbeknownst to them and the CEO. The hackers then managed to then send what was a completely obviously proper looking email to the CEO. As a result of that, information was disgorged. He hadn't taken the appropriate steps. That was his fault, and also his organisation's fault. But they got into some pretty serious company information by virtue of that. So education is the key, and I'm not suggesting it should be education at any one particular level. It should be education at all levels, and that's really, for me, the most important thing.
And educating, we've got a couple of CISOs here, Dennis and Joe. Educating staff remotely must present different challenges, I guess.
It does present different challenges because, as Ingo said, typically you have people coming in, you have the inductions, you have someone get a phishing email, they stand and look around and tell their colleagues, and it spreads like wildfire, which is what we notice. However, what we have to do is accept where we are, firstly. So we have to agree when the fourth industrial revolution, change is going to happen much quicker. There's uncertainty beyond our control which impacts us, and we can kind of influence what's going to happen, but in all cases we can't. And we have to also consider how much friction we add to our employees, because most people that we've spoken to that have clicked on link have clicked on it because of pressure. So being at work for a long day, having the whole family things to deal with, positive COVID results, or teaching kids when we became teachers. So it's looking at the whole well-being, and actually, rather than operating InfoSec as a silo, integrating it into the business, working with HR, working with managers, and working with colleagues, and getting to the grassroots.
Yeah, I do think I agree with that. I think the traditional annual training plan is something we've just got to dispose of. The cyber threat is constantly evolving and changing, and you can't keep people abreast of those threats and those issues unless you're providing training almost on a continual basis.
And I think sharing information. I mean, I see a big change in the corporate structure where you normally want to hide. There's been some kind of attacks or something now. Very quickly, you see on corporate email coming out, be aware of this phishing attack, or we've seen this, or this is the outcome of this. And I think that's really the most important, because that's really on-the-fly learning and then teaching on what's going on right now, and get the awareness of the users that we are potentially under attack. Something might happen. Be a bit more aware.
So don't be ashamed of the fact that you've suffered a cyber attack.
No.
Communicate with your staff, explain to them what's happened. You need to be a little bit careful with that communication, though, don't you? You don't want too much information maybe leaking out into the press, or you may need to make sure that the details are correct and that the right people are speaking there. But it's not time to close the door on user education and user training just yet.
Great.
It's about evolving it in a way. So the old days of when I've done user awareness training, sometimes I feel like I'm just talking to a room full of donkeys. It's just like, so they're not really taking anything in. So being more imaginative about it, being more engaging, finding a way to do it remotely.
Yeah, you've got virtual escape rooms, different activities you can do remotely.
Okay, well, that's cool. Oh, you've got a cool company doing escape rooms.
Thankfully.
Okay, so that's terrific. So let's take a look at the poll, and thank you to everyone who's been participating in that so far. The question was, following the pandemic, how has your visibility and tracking of sensitive organizational data assets changed? 17% said it's better. Oh, that's good. So just less than 1 in 5 said it's better. However, 47%, almost half of the organizations who participate in our poll right now, say it's worse, and 36% say the same. So are we surprised that round about a half of people say their visibility and tracking of sensitive organizational data assets has changed with a remote workforce? Is anyone surprised by that discovery?
The actual figure was quite low, I thought. I
yeah.
It'd be going to be higher.
You thought it'd be higher?
Yeah.
So we are surprised, but maybe that it's a little bit low because all those computers, all those laptops, maybe being shared with little Timmy as well to do his
homework.
And also the disparity between the security in a company situation as opposed to a working from home situation.
Yes.
I think that's really key.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, well, we've talked somewhat about educating the workers, but I think we also need to educate the C-level staff as well, don't we? Need to educate the rest of the board with things to do with cybersecurity. That's what our next section is going to be about. But before I do that, I've got another poll question for you. Let's make sure those fingers really are working. Third of 4 poll questions I'm going to ask you today. Has recognition of cybersecurity issues changed has it changed at board level since the pandemic? So has their recognition, the board's recognition of cybersecurity issues, has that changed since the pandemic? Do you think it's increased their recognition or decreased because they're worrying about other stuff, or stayed about the same?